On today's episode of Locked On Texans, Big Sarge joins the show to discuss, of course, Stefon Diggs. What else?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for all of our first-time listeners and viewers. If this is your first time watching or listening to the show, please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you to all of our returning listeners as Cody and I continue to talk Texans. I'm your football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, one of the hardest working men in the business, Sports Illustrated's own credential media member for the Houston Texans, Cody Davis. Diggs' impact on the Texans championship window. That's the talking point for today's show. How does Diggs impact the Texans offense? And, those two talking points will be joined by none other than Brian Big Sarge Bearfield. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation when we open up today's show. Just looking at Stefon Diggs, is this the most exciting move in franchise history? Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKED ON for $20 off your first purchase. Cody, you look at moves, and I think we are primarily going to look at trades, right? Moves, trades. However, is this the most exciting trade move in franchise history?
I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say yes. This is the first time that I could recall the Houston Texans literally going after a top-tier player like Stefon Diggs, executing the trade, and actually finishing it, closing the deal. So to start this conversation off, because when we started recording, another question popped into my mind, and this one is going to be a little bit fun. And listeners and viewers, let me know how you guys feel in the comment section and on Twitter. But John, yes or no, do you agree that this is the biggest trade in Texans franchise history?
Oh man, that's tough. I'm trying to think of all of the other trades, and to be completely honest with you, the only one that comes to mind is the Laramie Tunsil trade. And that trade was not as well received then as
I liked it.
Stefon Diggs trade that happened Wednesday. So I think if you stack those two up against each other, also looking at what Houston gave up, right? I think Stefon is probably more exciting because of the offense, what he'll mean for this offense. Trade-wise, Matt Schaub wasn't necessarily – was he a trade? Did Houston trade for him, or was he a free agent at that point? I cannot remember, but in any case, that wasn't exciting. So I could see, and maybe I'm missing somebody or a trade, but I could see this being the most exciting trade in franchise history. I could see that.
Now, the reason why I went with most exciting, because as we all know, the interest level, the excitement surrounding this trade is at an all-time high. I can't say best because we got to see how all of this play out. So, John, let's take it a step further. And this is going to be very fun. Is this the most exciting trade in the city of Houston over the last 20 years when you take a look at all major sports? Because in the last 20 years alone, I think of 2004, golly, literally 20 years ago, the Houston Rockets landed Tracy McGrady in their trade with the Orlando Magic. I also think of some of the most recent ones, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, of course, with the Rockets. Of course, we got probably the biggest one, but at the time it was pretty exciting. Justin Verlander coming to the Houston Astros.
James Harden on 2012.
I'm going to exclude that trade. I'm excluding that trade only because nobody expected James to do what he did in City of Houston for 9 years when the trade first happened. I'm just looking at the moment the trade happened. I think this might be the most exciting trade in Houston sports history over the last 20 years. I think the only one that might surpass it is maybe Tracy McGrady, because that was pretty big at the time.
No, and then we probably should have got Locked On Astros, because I don't think nothing's gonna beat Justin Verlander until a championship is brought, and to the Rockets or to the Texans, and now we're talking about Diggs, so specifically to the Texans. But at that time, when that trade happened for the Astros, everybody pretty much knew, oh, this was it. They were getting to the World Series. And with Verlander, not the first time, I feel like the second time he came back to Houston, right? He was a major part of this team.
That's true.
Playoff push. So I don't think nothing is more exciting trade-wise in the last 20 years than Justin Verlander. That's just me. Verlander, number one. Diggs, number two. CP, number three, tied with Tracy McGrady. The expectations for T-Mac and Yao Ming were super high. They never reached it, of course. But I can understand if somebody sit back and say, man, excitement-wise, Diggs is up there. But nobody's going to beat Verlander. I don't think so. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Who doesn't like that, right? Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Friday installment of Locked On Texans. And as promised, you guys already know who it is. Mr. Brian Belfield, credential beat reporter for USA Today Texans Wire. But you guys know him as Big Sarge, my homie, my brother. What's going on? Welcome back to Locked On Texans.
What's going on, man? Sorry, I have to do this before we start, Cody.
Oh no, you good. Yeah, fix the goat.
Yeah. The baby goat. Sorry, I had to fix that, man. I cannot have Kobe twisted at all. Period. What's going on, man? Thanks for having me back, brother. I appreciate it.
Man, before we start talking about Stefon Diggs, Sarge, on behalf of John and myself, and I was out there in Indianapolis with you, the one thing me and John, every time we talk about, this trade for Stefon Diggs, or, last week, especially after we got news that they had restructured the contract of Titus Howard and Shaq Mason, opening up $31 million. Me and John on this show on several different occasions always talked about the report that you shared at the NFL Combine, which, by the way, listeners and viewers, me and Sarge spent a lot of time together at the Combine, but during this particular time, I didn't know where he was at. I didn't know what he was doing. Got on Twitter, saw his report that, people was telling them that, watch out for Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans. They definitely have something up their sleeve. So Sarge, about a month after the NFL Combine, a month or so after the NFL Combine, here we are talking about arguably the biggest trade in franchise history up until this point. One, are you surprised by this move? And two, What are your overall thoughts about the Houston Texans landing Stefon Diggs?
Well, I'm not surprised at all. And just like I reported, I was told that Nick Caserio has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. I was talking to a couple of people who are NFL execs while I was there. For some reason, Cody, people just like to talk to me. I don't know what it is. Like people just love to strike up conversations with me. And then, sometimes I have this hat on, sometimes I have on something that say, Sarge or whatever, and they just see and they just like, hey, big guy, come over here. Let's chat. Let's talk. And so, but there were some people that were saying that they would not be surprised if Nick Caserio made some really good moves that would surprise a lot of people. And the first move, remember now, he, outside of what he did by getting, Danielle Hunter without getting Joe Mixon. I'm talking about the way that he was able to maneuver those draft picks. You remember he traded out of the first round and then used that draft pick in order to get Stefon Diggs. And all this, I said this earlier on my podcast that the Houston Texans are winning the offseason. There is not another team in the NFL that is doing a better job in the offseason than the Houston Texans. And so with that being said, Nick is not finished wheeling and dealing, Cody. It's the crazy part about it. We haven't even gotten to the draft yet.
I know.
Nick is not finished wheeling and dealing. And, with this guy being here, it's going to be one of those things where at some point, we're not going to be surprised. We're just going to be like, oh, it's just Nick Caserio. Just doing what he does. And so by landing Stefon Diggs, once again, I said this earlier. Stefon Diggs has been labeled a diva. But you notice he only gets labeled a diva when he's trying to leave a situation. When he's trying to leave Minnesota, he was labeled a diva. When he was trying to leave Buffalo, he was labeled a diva. But when you go back and you look at those situations, right, and what he was trying to get away from, let's just start with the Minnesota Vikings and the Buffalo Bills. They're not the Houston Texans. And what I mean by they're not the Houston Texans is they don't have or haven't had a head coach like DeMeco Ryans. They have a former NFL player that's running the Houston Texans now who sees it from both sides, from a player side and from a coach's side. And so players around the league, they want to play for DeMeco Ryans. One of the things that Saquon Barkley, one of the things that sold him on wanting to play for the Houston Texans, and he was this close to becoming a Houston Texan, was DeMeco Ryans, was CJ Stroud, but especially DeMeco, because he's one of those coaches that can sit down and talk ball with you on the field and off the field. And so we know that Saquon ended up, you can't pass up, of course, going home to play. I mean, he just went home, and I'll give him that. But as I digress, Stefon Diggs coming here, it's not going to be any of that quote-unquote diva-like mentality because DeMeco Ryans is not going to play that. It starts and stops with him. And he's not a dictator, but he's also one of the guys that he doesn't just look at one guy. He looks at the team as a whole, and he's not going to allow one guy to stop the progress of what the Houston Texans are trying to do. I think that Stefon Diggs recognized that because there had to be a conversation that was had between DeMeco, between Nick, and between Stefon before any of this could even happen. And so with that being said, when I say that the Houston Texans are not the Minnesota Vikings and not the Buffalo Bills, it starts with the coach. Second of all, and I know that this may sound blasphemous to some people, but CJ Stroud isn't Kirk Cousins. CJ Stroud isn't Josh Allen. And I say that to say Kirk Cousins was always playing for a contract. I mean, he done made $500 million, right? By the time he retired, he made $500 million. all with subpar play and always being on some of the best rosters. I mean, where's he at now?
I'm Atlanta. A big contract coming off an Achilles.
And they're loaded. They're loaded. And so he's always, been in that position. He's always playing for the next contract. That's not CJ Stroud. Josh Allen, he reads his own press clippings. He wants to be the name first. Hey, cool. Buffalo Bills first. You can put Buffalo Bills. Yeah. Make sure you say Josh Allen, though. Stefon, now, whoa. Gabe, whoa. Josh Allen. You don't have that in CJ Stroud. CJ ain't looking for the headline. CJ wants to win. That's all he wants to do. He doesn't want the headline. And I get it. A side note, I get it, Josh Allen. You come from a school where nobody really know you. You know, CJ comes from Ohio State where everybody knew who he was. I mean, here's a Heisman finalist 2 years in a row. And so moving forward, he's no longer playing with Kirk Cousins. He's no longer playing with Josh Allen. He's playing with, in the immortal words of the great Negro poet Laramie Tunsil, a dog.
Yes, sir. And SARS, to your point about, Stefon Diggs not coming to Houston with that diva mentality, I also want to mention, and I can't wait till we have our introductory press conference to see what transpired between the Texans, Stefon Diggs, and the Buffalo Bills, because, I'm starting to think, if this was a situation where the Bills say, you know what, we want to send you to a good situation, give us a list of teams, quarterbacks you would like to play for, and of course, Houston Texans CJ Stroud was going to be on that list. This will also be the first time that Stefon Diggs will have an opportunity to pick where he wants to go and not being drafted by a team or just shift off because they don't want to pay you and all this other stuff. So, I'm glad that you brought that point up, but we cannot talk about Stefon Diggs and CJ Stroud. It looks all good on paper. And to be honest with you, I hate knowing that we still have about at least 3 months before we see them at least in OTAs, voluntary OTAs. I'm pretty sure CJ and them will be there. Hopefully, if not, we're going to have to wait until the end of July. But sorry, we know what this offense did last year. First year head coach, first year play caller, rookie quarterback. We saw the good, the bad, and then, of course, in Baltimore, we saw the ugly.
Sure.
When you add Stefon Diggs to this offense, where and how much better do you think this offense could get?
They're going to be a top 5 to top 7 offense in the entire NFL. They're going to probably be the number 2. I can see them being at least the number 2 offense in the AFC, only because you still have that high power offense of Miami. So Miami will probably be number 1 by putting up a bunch of yards. They have that track team at wide receiver and at running back. So I can see them being number 1, but in the AFC, I could see the Houston Texans being number 2. And that's because, we talked about CJ, but adding Joe Mixon, and I don't get me wrong, I'm a Devin Singletary fan. I love Motor. I love talking to Motor.
I grew into a fan too.
I love the way he played, but this is an upgrade in that backfield. And I think that now with that 1-2 punch of Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, because I still feel that there's a lot of football left in Dameon Pierce. And I feel like Dameon Pierce is going to be that running back when it gets down to 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, coming back for another year under this Bobby Slowick offense. Now he finally gets to play in an offense for 2 consecutive years. And so he's coming back in that Bobby Slowick offense, and they need 1 or 2 yards. He's going to be that bruiser to get you that 2 yards, maybe even 5 yards before, being tackled. And he's a good runner after contact. And so you got Joe Mixon. You already had defense has already had an issue trying to stop Nico Collins and Tank Dell when they were on the field together. Another year in that offensive system for Dalton Schultz, who is a very good tight end. And now you add Stefon Diggs. And if the wide receiver core stays the way that it is, I feel like John Mechie is going to get a lot more playing time. I feel like Xavier Hutchinson is going to get a lot more playing time, them being their second year inside of this offense, this second year playing with CJ Stroud, the second year of both of them having something to prove. And so it's just like, the backups coming in and wanting to prove that they belong. They want to prove that they belong on this team. And so that offense, to me, It's going to be high powered. The only thing that I worry about is when it comes to the offensive line. I don't know what the left guard situation is going to be. I don't know if Kenyon Green is going to come back. And I think that he will, watching what they did and watching what they did without him, I think that's going to fuel him to be, because he's still, I mean, he was a consensus 2-time All-American when he was at A&M. And he's not bad. He's just been, plagued by the injury bug. So the offensive line may be something that we have to watch, and how early, if Kenyon Green is still struggling after coming back off that injury, not playing a year of football, how hard will it be for him to adapt? And do you go back to putting Scruggs at the left guard and putting Patterson at the center position, because the right side is going to be solidified with Shaq Mason and Titus Howard? So that, if I had to say, the only thing that I would be worried about is maybe the offensive line. But other than that, they didn't gave CJ the keys to a Ferrari.
Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through the end of the month, April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. I do want to let you guys know that investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available only to U.S. customers in good standing.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest installment of Locked On Texans. There's two ways that I'm looking at this in terms of it having somewhat of a negative impact. One, you already addressed it, whether or not Stefon Diggs is going to come in with that quote-unquote diva mentality. But there's another way that I'm looking at this. How does this affect Nico Collins? Not only on the field, because, look, last year, career season, as we all know, wide receiver number 1, proved all his doubters wrong. But you add in Stefon Diggs, will he get the targets that he had? Will he still have an opportunity to be wide receiver number 1 or share that title with Stefon Diggs? So I look at it from an on-field perspective and also off-field perspective as well, because as we all know, Nico Collins is entering the final year of his rookie contract, and whether it happens this offseason or next offseason, he's going to be due for an extension.
You talked about Nico Collins. I don't think that it's going to affect him at all. Nico is a team player, 1. 2, I think that he's going to get his money because Stefon Diggs is an older wide receiver. What is he, 31 years old, if I'm not mistaken?
So along those lines.
He's 31 years old. He's here until 2027. So Nico is younger than him. Nico is a bigger possession wide receiver, one of those big wide receivers that CJ loves to play with as well. It's CJ is able to get that ball to Nico in his catch radius, which is big. And so I don't think that it's going to affect him at all when it comes to his play, when it comes to him being able to get his extension or anything like that. If anything, Stefon Diggs has to come and fit in with the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans don't have to conform to Stefon Diggs. Also, and I said this earlier. I've been hearing this thing that Stefon Diggs is going to come in, and what is CJ going to do when he demands the ball? What is CJ going to do when he demands the ball? Cody, let me take you. Look, I like to do this on the Sports Talk with Big Sarge podcast. I like to, You know that song by is it by Minnie Riperton? I stumbled across a photograph.
Back down memory lane.
Back down memory lane. It took me back. Let me take you back down memory lane real quick. You remember when C.J. Stroud was a starting quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes in the 2021 season, his first year starting?
Yeah.
His wide receiver core was Garrett Wilson,
Oof.
Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Chris Olave. 3 wide receivers who went first, second round. I don't know. Can't remember what Jackson Smith and Jigba went, but I know Olave went number 12 to the Saints, right?
Yeah.
And Garrett Wilson went.
And then I think Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith both had like 1,000 yards, and then Chris Olave was like 200 yards off.
Oh well, no. Let me give you the numbers. 2021, Garrett Wilson 70 receptions, 1,058 yards, 12 touchdowns. Jackson Smith and Jigba 95 receptions, 1,606 yards, 9 touchdowns. Chris Olave 65 receptions, 936 yards, 13 touchdowns.
God, oh.
So I don't think that CJ is going to have an issue spreading the ball around to Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stefon Diggs. He's done this before. He's played with those type of wide receivers before. He's played with the creme de la creme. And so CJ, I remember I want to say probably about week 3 or 4 of last season, I was talking to Tank. And Tank said, you know, when we out on the field, there is no wide receiver one.
I remember that.
CJ gonna get the ball to whoever open, or CJ gonna turn everybody into wide receiver one. And so Stefon Diggs coming in, I don't think that he's going to be demanding that the ball be thrown to him. But I will say that in this offense, man, and especially the key to this offense, once again, is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is what's going to open up everything for everybody else. And so he's going to get Stefon Diggs will be able to get his touches as well. So I don't think that there's going to be an issue with that. And I think that he looks at CJ differently. And listen, I have not talked to CJ and I have not talked to Stefon Diggs, so I'm just guesstimating right now. But I think
say yet, because you know they open that locker room. Oh, you already know.
For sure. Because look, I got some questions about his brother up in and plays up in Dallas.
What?
I gotta ask about these one-on-one battles.
Yeah, we talking about off record questions too.
For sure. But yeah, so I don't think it's gonna be a problem or issue with that.
You know, Sarge, we gotta go there. We have seen this team, you know, surpass expectations last year. I think I was talking to you a couple weeks ago, and I think you and I were just having a fun conversation of what does success look like for the Houston Texans next season. This was before all the moves, and I remember you saying, you know, if they don't make it to at least a divisional round, will it be a failure? Now, you look at all the moves that they have done. Wednesday morning, you trade for Stefon Diggs, somebody who is still a top 10, and on some occasions, still a top 5 receiver in the league today. Does this move elevate the Houston Texans into championship contention?
Of course it does. Of course. There's only one team. I'm sorry. Excuse me. There's only one division that I think that could keep the Houston Texans out of the AFC Championship game, and that's the AFC North with Baltimore, Pittsburgh.
Really?
Baltimore, Pittsburgh, the Browns, and the Steelers. Yeah, I think that I think that's the toughest division in the AFC, only because when you look at the quarterbacks, you have Lamar Jackson, you got Deshaun Watson, you have Joe Burrow, you got Russell Wilson, and when Russell Wilson can't get it done, them trading for Justin Fields is that was a huge get for the Steelers. And so the AFC Championship game may run through the AFC North, and with the way that the AFC North plays defense as well, because I know that the Houston Texans beat 3 out of those 4 tems, and 3 out of the 4 teams, but they had to beat the Browns, and they played the Browns the first time without C.J. Stroud. The second time in the wild card game, they beat them. But I mean, they beat the Bengals, they beat the Steelers. And like I said, that AFC North is very, very tough. When I look at the AFC West, I don't see anybody. Excuse me. They may have some competition in the AFC South. I like the moves that the Tennessee Titans made. I like the moves that the Jacksonville Jaguars made. And, you know, you look at the Indianapolis Colts with their head coach, their offensive-minded head coach, and them getting Anthony Richardson back. So they're going to have some competition in their own division as well. I don't see the AFC West, and I don't see the AFC East being able to compete, especially now. You might have the strongest team in the AFC. The AFC East is Miami, like we mentioned earlier. So when you look at that, right, in the AFC West, everybody thinks that the road still has to go through Kansas City. I think that the Kansas City run is over, and I'm going to go on record by saying that, and that's no shot at Patrick Mahomes. Anytime Superman steps on the field, you know, we like to say how CJ is a demigod. If CJ is a demigod, I don't even know what to call. I don't want to be blasphemous and call, you know, I don't want to use God for Patrick Mahomes, but whatever's above a demigod, that's what you know. I feel like this, man. It's almost like Patrick Mahomes is like Thanos. He's like, so competition, huh? Gone. It was like
exactly.
Y'all were at the bottom. Y'all weren't even in playoff contention. You're winning the Super Bowl again. And so I like what the Houston Texans are doing. They are building a franchise to compete for championships, not just, oh man, we won the AFC South. Oh, look at us. We made it to the playoffs. Oh, no way. So yeah, they're going to have a tough time with the AFC North, I believe. But other than that, this may be the year that they make AFC Championship game. Remember, Sarge said that right here on the Locked On Texans podcast.
So let's take it a step further.
Okay. Super Bowl?
AFC Championship game. They represent the city of Houston in New Orleans in the Super Bowl, in the Superdome. Is there any team in the NFC? Because I mean, honestly, like as of right now, I think another AFC team is going to win the Super Bowl. Because the NFC to me is not that strong. But is there any team in the NFC that you are a little, if they meet them in New Orleans, it might be a little bit challenging? I know that there's right off the bat, there's only two teams, Philly and San Fran. I think San Fran run is coming to an end. And I don't know what the hell happened with Philly this past year, but I think they might be the only team if everything gets back together like it was when they started this season. What was it, like 9-1, 10-1, or whatever it was? Maybe they might have an opportunity to knock the Texans off. But I think if the Texans make it out the AFC, there might be a parade in your city. Yeah.
Well, I look at it like this, Cody. I mean, of course, the odds-on favorite to represent the NFC right now is the San Francisco 49ers, right? And after that, I don't have the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's not because I'm a Cowboys fan, of course, and I'm definitely not putting the Dallas Cowboys up there. I'm one of those, right? You know me for long enough to know
you're right.
I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and I'm not, hey, we're going to the Super Bowl. Plus, the Cowboys didn't make any good moves in the
offseason. Had a quiet offseason.
They were horrible, but this is going to be crazy to you, but win so many brownie points with my wife when she listens to this. San Francisco, Green Bay, and then after that, the Detroit Lions.
That's a good one. I'm not gonna lie to you, Sarge. I forgot about Green Bay because Jordan Love, I'm not gonna say he on demigod level, but he did look extremely good last year, man. But
we're looking like this, Cody, real quick. Think about the way that Green Bay lost in the playoffs. Think about the way that Detroit lost in the playoffs. It wasn't that they didn't lose because they weren't competing. They lost because they hadn't been there before. And they started with Detroit. The coach made some terrible decisions. And with
they did.
And with Green Bay, they were just too young. I think Green Bay was one of the youngest teams. And if I'm not mistaken, they lost both of their running backs. My wife is somewhere. She knows. But listen, I married a great woman. She knows the roster. She when anything happens in Green Bay, she like go crazy. So yeah, but I will say San Francisco, Green Bay, and Detroit.
Brian Belfield, Big Sarge, credential beat reporter covering your Houston Texans for USA Today Texans Wire. Big Sarge, really quick, where can our listeners follow you at on all your social media platforms and where they can find all of your work?
Well, make sure you subscribe to the Sports Talk with Big Sarge podcast, available wherever you get your podcast from. And follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Sarge Sports with the Z at the end, and on Instagram at Big Sarge Sports with the Z at the end. Follow me on the Tick and the Talk at Big Sarge Media, and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Big Sarge Media. Also, make sure that you are following the Texans Wire, Cody has said my government name, Brian Bearfield. So don't go to Texans Wire USA Today looking for Big Sarge. Sarge, I had went there, right? And I was looking for your articles, but I seen somebody named Cole. I seen somebody named John. I seen somebody named Patrick. Then I seen somebody named Brian. I ain't see Sarge, though. Like, keep looking. You'll find, look, just keep looking. Go through all the articles. Maybe you was on the wrong page.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. And please be sure to follow my co-host, John Hickman, at John_Hickman12. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.